The Retromini wasn't the best console in the last video I made about it. Thanks to the YouTube channel Enoch Breaks It, I managed to not only install the custom firmware, but actually find the files for it, because a lot of the links are broken and non-available anymore. I will link his YouTube channel down in the description. Now, what has changed since last time? You have a bunch more emulators. You have, as an example, the Atari Lynx, the Wonder Swan, Pokemini, different like Ataris, Atari 2600, and PC Engine. I am not familiar with these systems, so I have not tested how well these work. The main three systems I want to have a look at, though, is the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Advance. So let's go right into the Game Boy. So, first of all, the screen is now properly scaled. Of course, it is a bit small, especially when you compare it to an original Game Boy. Here's one for size. So it isn't the best experience, of course. But in terms of emulation, it is much improved. First of all, the sound. Just listen to it. Much better. The game itself runs smooth. It runs really smooth. This is just the way I expect it to run. Compared to before, this is night and day. So I would say for Game Boy, this is an S. This is fantastic. This game just runs just the way it should. And it's improved the console tremendously in that regard. But next up is the Game Boy Color. And the Game Boy Color has indeed improved as well. It's now actually playable, just like the Game Boy. This is probably the biggest improvement you will see on this device. And if all you want to do is play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, I would say if you just pay $10, it is much more worth it. But you might wonder now, the main feature that this device has is that the screen is perfect for the Game Boy Advance. So let me move over to that real quick. I can report that the freezes are gone. It runs pretty good, with an asterisk. I think certain games you will have no problem. Especially more slower games that don't need too much input, too much action, And even this feels like it's running native right now. However, it might be just this game or other games as well. But I will play this for a little bit and show you how vastly it can vary. So now that I've reached this point, the game still runs perfectly fine, but as soon as I go into this time chase mode, it completely breaks down. It's absolutely unplayable. Like, it's extremely slow. I would say it runs maybe at 30%, or like even a quarter of what it should run at. And it's only honestly a little bit disappointing because it looks really good on this screen, I have to say. And up until this point, I was really enthusiastic about it. But I think certain games will play very well. If all you want to do is play Pokemon, I think that should run without any problems. Now, the last thing I want to quickly show is this little thing called Pico 8. And Pico 8 is a fantasy console where the games are entirely, written inside of it with like their own version of Lua, or like Lua with like a bit of their own API to it. It's quite an interesting thing. I will put a link down in the description as well. I can highly recommend checking it out, because there are thousands of games that people have made. But a bit of the problem that Pico 8 has on this system is it's not very reliable. So more simpler games will, as a matter of fact, run. Now, as you can see, it doesn't run. That is because for whatever reason, the core in RetroArch doesn't work. But there's a standalone emulator, which you can download, and that one works to a certain degree. So what I mean by that, the game I just tried to start, I will try to start it now from here, actually starts without problem. And not only that, it runs perfectly smooth. It's a little stretched, right? I think that probably can be fixed somehow. But it runs perfect. However, at the same time, you can also encounter the problem with, let's say here there's a part of R-Type that somebody made. It's black. Not only that, okay, in this case not, but sometimes the console just freezes. I recorded this video before and it completely locked up, and it can happen, not always, but the game itself doesn't load. So it's very hit or miss if they even run, and some of these games just run very slowly, much slower than they should. Which is honestly a shame, because this could have been a great little device to add like that little bit extra with the Pico 8 support. Sad that it didn't work. But with that being said, I now slightly recommend this. If you find one of these for $10, I would say pick it up. With custom firmware, it can be quite an interesting device. And maybe you're the kind of guy who has like quite a bit of experience with these devices, and maybe be able to improve the Pico 8 emulator, maybe make a very easy framework for people to create games that run on this very well. Who knows? Something like the Playdate, which, despite its single purposeness, has quite an active community. Buy it if you find it for cheap, like for really cheap. Otherwise, I would say ignore it still. And with that, I want to say thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.